changes. Move to approve. Or any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, very good. Now we're going to move on to public comment. And I think last time I started on the right, so we're going to start on the left. Anyone want to comment? All right. How about the fourth row? Would you like to comment? Okay, back row. All right, we're going to move on to the right side. Anyone want to comment publicly? If so, if you don't mind stating your name, please.
My name is Douglas Mullen. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the members of our township for the support of the 18 mil non-homestead property tax renewal that they just passed. I was on the board for 14 years, and it's a really important millage still. For township residents, I would like to thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else on the right side, my right side, your left side, want to comment publicly? All right, we'll close public comment. And then how about we'll move on to the department reports. Any of the representatives, if they want to make a comment or if the board has any questions for them, feel free.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
At the mobile gas station, I could have Chief Gamby come up again. We had a second save there with a heart attack, and if he can say a few words on what happened.
Last week.
Yes, last Wednesday night, we got a call of a gentleman fall at the mobile gas station. Shortly after the call came in, it was updated that it was a class 1 heart attack. We had our department responded. Two of our members just that lived down just the road here came there, seeing that we had trucks getting ready to get en route. They went right directly to the mobile gas station, probably had about a 2.5, 3-minute response, started CPR. The patient got transferred to Holland Hospital and then was transferred to U of M later on that night. And I just got an email that he came home today, so he is at home. So both AMR and Ottawa County Sheriff and the fire department responded, and yeah, it's our second save in less than a month and a half. So
Very good. So good. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we're going to move on to action items then. Action item A is the Jennison Road end. Would you all like to say a few words?
I'm Tom Slickers. I reside at 2065 Lakeway Drive in Park Township. I'm also the CEO and president of Tierra Yachts, which owns the corporate yachting center on the south side of the lake. It's actually a neighbor to me. And for the last 30 years, there's a road end that separates the corporate yachting center and Mitch and Karen Padness. And that road end has kind of been nothing. It's been too small to really do anything with, and doesn't really accommodate much of anyone other than the fact that it just continues to deteriorate over time. And it's been an observation of us that there's really been no investment that's been made in that spot for a lot of obvious reasons. And we know that the township's long-term desire is to try to do as much as they can favorably with a lot of these road ends that have kind of a funky setting. So it is, I guess, an honor to be able to just suggest that we wanted to donate road end improvement, turn it in. It can't be really a park per se, but a road end improvement, nice sidewalk going down to the lake, and maybe a walk-in access, which is appropriate for that area. But try to provide something that's worthwhile and nice for the neighborhood, nice for Park Township, and we're willing to do that, fund that, and then we're also willing to provide the support and maintenance for that for 10 years as a gift to the township. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you. Right, first of all, any questions for the Slickers at all?
I just have one observation. It's nice to see the kayak rack there. How's that gonna be monitored, or can anybody just temporarily use it? Or I can see that being a very busy entity.
I think it was our understanding, it was actually a suggestion by the township to put a kayak rack there. I think you have one at South Shore Marine down there, and I believe that that's something that you guys rent or offer to the citizens of Park Township for a rental fee. And I thought that was kind of how you guys were hoping to do that.
Sure.
We wouldn't be building them.
No,
No.
we would build
We
it.
would maintain.
Supply.
We would take reservations for it.
Correct.
Great. It looks awesome.
I don't know that we would monitor it per se, but I
Right.
think
No,
hopefully there's a way you guys have to monitor that.
Right.
Yeah.
exactly. So, all right. Any other questions? All right. So we could do one of two things here. We could either look for a motion, or if there's discussion we want to have first, I don't care.
I have a question, upon review of the proposal, the question I have is I'm a bit uncomfortable that, I'm sorry, I'm a bit uncomfortable the transfer of property. And I look at either Howard or Dan and say, if there's another opportunity to have an agreement that doesn't transfer ownership of public property to a private entity, other than a title transfer.
Before Dan speaks, I'll just say, when I wrote this initial memo, the packet went out on Thursday, Friday, and indicated Mr. Slickers that we would need some kind of an agreement to be voted on, and he presented to me the agreement that is in your packet. So I didn't have that agreement when the initial packet went out. That's when I saw the initial 7 feet that was in there. So I think that is something that needs to be evaluated. So thank you for saying so.
One thing that I would say is, as Mr. Slickers reported to you just moments ago, he referred to this as donating a road end improvement and as a gift for the township. If that were the case, then the transfer of the 7 feet title to that property from the township to the Slickers or TR Yachts wouldn't be necessary. If you are going to be donating it, backing up. So what I'm saying is, if it's a true donation of the road end improvement, as Mr. Slickers said, and if it's truly a gift to the township, as Mr. Slickers just said to you, you wouldn't be giving anything in exchange for it. What this agreement indicates is that you would be giving 7 feet in exchange for the road end improvement. So it wouldn't be a donation. It wouldn't be a gift. It would be a quid pro quo exchange. So part of what you would want to look into to see if it's truly a quid pro quo is, what is the value of the improvements in 10 years of maintenance? And what is the value of a front foot on Lake Nakatawa that you would be giving in exchange for those improvements and 10 years of maintenance, to make sure that there's a true value for value exchange.
And that hasn't been done.
To the best of my knowledge, it hasn't done either.
I
And so again, if Tierra Yachts is wanting to make a donation and a gift to the township as has been represented, Section 3 could come out of that agreement and you could move forward. If it's not a donation and gift as has been represented, but an actual quid pro quo exchange, then you should really figure out those two values. Are you getting value equal to what you're giving?
I would assume the value of the property, if it's 7 feet in question is transferred, this has value. also increases on the Terra yacht center.
It would, correct. Because they've got another 7 feet of frontage.
So that the tax value goes up and government comes charged as well.
It would.
I guess I don't know, is the 7 feet part of it or is it not part of it?
So the 7 feet is not part of the road end. So there's the road end. In 1925, for whatever reason, the township was deeded a 7-foot piece of property.
Okay.
And who knows why, but
There's a county road end which is owned by Ottawa County Road Commission.
right.
Immediately adjacent to that is 7 feet of property owned by the township.
Function.
Pardon me?
I apologize. Go ahead. Go ahead. I apologize.
Okay. Then further to the east is the Terra yachts property. And so there is together public property owned by the county and the township, which is effectively the road end, used as a road end.
Functionally, the 7 feet is part of what we consider as the access to the water.
I guess I'm a little confused. We don't want to transfer anything, right? Our township residents want road in. We don't want to transfer anything. We just want to accept the gift.
Well,
After 10 years, if we transfer something over to them, they can do what they want with it, correct?
Well, the way the agreement reads is you would quit claim the deed after the execution of the agreement. So it wouldn't even be 10 years. It would be once you sign this agreement, even before the improvements are put in.
Yeah, and I don't believe our residents,
so the road end doesn't go away. The
Right.
road end improvement is still there. So, so from that standpoint, we give up 7 feet. So that, I don't know, until last year, I didn't even know the township had it. And I been on the board for 6-7 years. I don't know if you all knew that it was there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So is it something that takes away the functionality of the road end? If we did that, absolutely not. Does it improve the road end? Yes, it does.
it looks beautiful and it's a great plan. I love it. I'm just thinking, down the road, we give them the 7 feet and then down the road, the county says, wow, they have that 7 feet on the west side. Why not just deed it, the road into them too? So that's what I'm a little concerned about.
Is the county able to do that, Dan? Without
If-
us
if the-
being involved?
Yeah, no, you would be involved. If the road's gonna be vacated, one, the county's gonna ask you if you want it. Two, it would then be split, so it wouldn't all go to Terra yachts. Typically, if the township doesn't want the road end, especially that ends at Lake, it would go half to Pagnos, half to Terra yachts.
So I don't think that would ever happen unless the board said we don't want it. And who knows what'll happen years and years down the road, but that's out of our hands.
Is it okay to ask the applicant what they want the 7 feet for?
Sure.
What do you want the 7 feet for?
Yeah, we want the 7 feet for
Protection, I guess, yeah.
protection from what? You can't do anything with the 7 feet. The 7 feet doesn't do the county or the township any good. So if you haven't done anything with the 7 feet, you can't do anything with the 7 feet. So it's of no value to you. It might be an asset on the list for the township. We don't even know why it was deeded to the township. It doesn't matter at this point, it's irrelevant, but at this particular juncture, it is, on the deed, and so we're recognizing that we're not trying to take anything away as a function out of the road end. We're trying to improve, but we're also trying to maximize our property for what we do there as a functioning operation.
Understood.
So I don't.
I guess I need clarification as to what the Slickers are actually giving to us. Are they actually donating us a gift, or are they requesting active a transfer of the actual property? And if they are, then I think I understand they want to take that property in order to control it until 10 years is up. At which time we take responsibility for it. And then do we need to transfer that back into our portfolio then?
The 7 feet is theirs.
The 7 feet is theirs. The road end is continuing to be there. We would then be in charge of maintaining the road end. If the township decided to say, we're not gonna maintain it and let it fall apart, we could, but hopefully the board wouldn't do
So
that.
does the park include that they're building the 7 feet?
No. No,
Is that?
no, it includes the road end. It does not include the 7 feet.
Okay. Clarification, you're saying, so the improvements that they were asking for are only on the county property? And not
Correct.
on the 7 feet?
Correct.
Okay, I was under the impression that the improvements
No.
were included into the 7 feet.
No, no.
Okay, that also then taints my perception. I thought that they needed to have the 7 feet to complete the plan.
No,
Okay. It's like it's a little bit like a courtship at this point. We're entering into an agreement with a private party to do some work on a public piece of property. And we don't know how they work. We assume that they'll take care of it, assume that it will get done. There's a lot of assumptions on this, that this will all go well. And I have the highest regard for the men in the room and the company they represent. But as a fiduciary of public property, I think we should do some due diligence for the next decade and see how it goes. So if I make suggestions that if we could enter into an agreement say a 10-year lease for a buck, and we still maintain ownership of that property, I would respectfully disagree with our gentleman in the audience, Mr. Slickers, that our 7 feet is not valuable. Our 7 feet is very valuable because it's attached to a road end of substance. So the public owns substantial property on that road end, so there is value on our 7 feet. So I would say we enter into a 10-year dating relationship to see how they deliver and how we use it and how the township residents use it. And so let the next 4 or 10 years from now decide if they want to deed it over. But I think it sets a precedent about transferring private or public property to private residents that I don't want to be part of. Because we had a significant issue with something over in Lake Michigan. And I think the board has to be really careful about what they do with public property. And I want to step very daintily into this and go into a courtship rather than a complete settlement of that property. That's my.
and I hear what you're saying, but I think to compare it to the other piece is not quite the same. Because the public is still getting access to the water, whereas over there, they would not be. So there is a difference there. So, and the township is getting benefit from the creation of what is intended.
Oh, the value is there.
I think it would be prudent to get an appraisal. I like what council said. I think it would be prudent to get an appraisal on the value of that 7-foot strip that most people don't know about. And compare that to the cost of maintaining that road end as a nice little road end park for 10 years and see if there really is quid pro quo. And if there is, then I think it would be very easy for us to go ahead and make that agreement. So I think if I were to make a motion tonight, it would be to direct the manager to secure an appraisal on that 7-foot strip of land so that we have some degree of comparison and that we postpone any decision on land transfers till the next meeting. Would that seem like a reasonable motion to you, Mr.
You
Supervisor?
said if you were going to make a motion, is this a motion?
I will make it a motion if,
Okay.
I'm trying
I
to,
think it's
I'm trying to gauge reaction here and I'm gonna make it a motion. Go for it.
getting a general consensus of what the board thinks at this point. I think that's reasonable, correct?
I think.
If I can offer a suggestion.
Okay,
So two potential approaches. One is get an appraisal that will cost you a few $1,000s, presumably to appraise what a front foot of Lake Michigan, or excuse me, Lake Mac property would be. This is going to be a challenging appraisal. I think maybe we could start with having Al, our assessor, identify what value he would place on 7 feet of Lake Mac property. And then I can inform the board of that valuation. And then you all can decide at a later date if you want to then follow up with an appraisal, which would cost some money, or using that information. So that's my suggestion.
And following up on council's suggestion, I'd be very curious what the value of the donation is. Because that also it helps us understand what we get for
Right.
the trade. And so if we get to understand that, the estimation of the improvements, that also, it flows into a decision that if it is with pro and all these things, the numbers shouldn't make sense. We haven't seen any numbers. I would second that motion.
any other discussion, questions?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. I think the lease option has some merit. So I could support going that way. I don't have a problem with us finding out the values for both sides of that property. The 7 feet plus the improvements. But I think once we get there, I still think a lease could be a reasonable approach.
Yeah, I'd like to throw another wrench and question into it. Shouldn't we then notify the Padnesses and give them an opportunity if they want that 7 feet also?
It's on the opposite side.
It's on
Yeah,
the east
so-
side of the-
It's on the Slicker side of the property.
Okay, okay, got it. Told you I was confused.
Okay. Right. Any other questions? Right,
Can I hear the motion totally again? What are we getting?
The motion was for us to direct the manager, but I like his idea better. The motion was to direct the manager to get an appraisal on the value of the 7-foot strip so that we could compare it to the costs of the improvements and make a reasonable decision.
since your motion didn't say who gave the appraisal, are you okay with whoever gives the appraisal?
I am.
Okay.
Because I like his suggestion, so.
Okay, all right.
Okay with that?
Thank you.
Do we have a good cost value for the improvements that are gonna go in and the maintenance, or we gotta create that?
We'll have to ask for it.
We'll have to ask for it.
Right, so your motion needs to include that. So we got both sides of the equation.
Then I would expand the motion to include asking the Slickers for an evaluation of their expenditure on the improvements
And the 10-year maintenance.
and the 10-year maintenance.
Thank you.
So.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, so we will have this on the agenda for next month and then we will decide. So. All right, moving on. All right. So there was supposed to be another breakdown here. Where is the? Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to item B, breakdown. We got to decide what kind of contract we want to establish with the sheriff's patrol. And do you want to make some comments? So Eric is going to make some comments. Mr. DeBoer, he's the undersheriff, correct?
Thank you. Hello again. It's good to see you all. Before we kind of engage in this discussion, I want to just make sure we're all in the same mind frame here, because I've noticed in some of the correspondence and some of the emails and some of the memos, what I believe to be a bit of a false equivalency. And I want to make sure that it's kind of brought up now before we start getting into actual numbers. And what I'm talking about is the thought process that the expenditures that were voted on last month to improve the fire department are a direct correlation of the subtraction of the paramedic services of the park or of the E unit. What was voted on last month about the improvements on the fire department was to add full-time firefighters. Now that the sheriff's office takes no position on the fire department's size or makeup, but in order to respond to the medical calls that are currently being taken by the paramedic unit of the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office is currently 1.3 medical calls a day, anywhere from slip and falls, general illness, up to and including the class ones that the chief noted earlier in this meeting. So all this to say, there are 16 other townships, all of which have different ways to address medical calls based on what their fire department needs. And some of them have the fire chief respond to calls. I know that was brought up last month. Some of them have designated paid on calls on the stipend to make sure that their firefighters respond. All these were options that could have, at a much lesser cost, just dealt with the paramedic response. When I was sitting here and I heard the chief explaining what the full-time fire guys would do, or firefighters would do, I apologize. There are a lot of other things that are a great value add to the Park Township and the Park Township Fire Department. There's no doubt about that. But those are extra added things that the board chose to pay for. The reason I want to say this is because when there's this big number out there of this $50,000 over or $500,000 over the course of the next couple of years, if you think that that's just because of we're getting rid of the unit program, then it would stand to reason that we have to find $500,000 of savings in our offerings to you. And I don't want that to get confused here. The addition of 4 employees, 2 trucks, and possibly the Coast Guard station to hold the firefighters is so that you can have full-time firefighters and not just because of the medical issues. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear on, so that when we start talking about numbers, if we're going to get rid of deputies, I mean, that's going to be a significant issue. I've worked for the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office for 22 years now. My first posting was here in Park Township. The only change in coverage or staffing was the addition of TS6, our traffic services car, which had been funded partially by the schools when they had 3 officers. They got rid of one of them because of funding, and Park and Holland picked it up. And that's why you have a traffic car, but you were already paying for some of it already. Over the course of 22 years, we haven't added any cars, but we certainly haven't had less calls for service, and Park Township has not gotten smaller. When I was on the planning commission, I know we weren't going and doing any development north of James Street until south of James Street filled in. And I'm noticing that south of James Street filled in, and we're starting to do some growth north of James Street, and Macatawa Legends got back fired up, and Timberline Acres has had 2 or 3 more phases. This has added people. This has added coverage needs. So I just wanted that all in our minds while we're making decisions on funding. I understand that money doesn't grow on trees, and adding $500,000 to over the course of a number of years is going to impact what you guys need to do. But I just wanted to just say all that before we got into real discussions on what that looks like. With that, I will entertain any questions.
So I appreciate that explanation on our business. Can you explain to me how much removing that cost of the paramedic coverage how much savings or how much reduction have you offered to us? Because of that.
Sure.
It's a pure reduction of service.
Sure.
So that's
So-
exactly what.
The only difference, and I'll ask Howard if he's got the number in front of him, but there's a cost difference between what you pay for a paramedic deputy and what you pay for a standard deputy. That reduction is the reduction of going from an E unit to 8 police officers, which is what it is. So historically, when I started, the E unit program did their best to stay available so that they could take medicals. In doing so, they were only for traffic and medicals. Over the course of the last 20 years, that's evolved. Those police officers are taking calls. They're taking all of the calls that we normally would have left to general area cars because of how busy things are. And so when they're not taking that 1.3 average medical call in Park Township a day, they're out here taking your police calls. So the only difference is that I think it's a couple $1,000s a paramedic. Do you remember, is it $8,000 per paramedic over the year?
I could not tell
Do you
you.
have exhibit A in front of you by chance? From our
The,
contract?
the difference between a sheriff patrol officer and an E unit deputy is minimal.
Yes.
And the
That's fair.
reality is, let me just clear,
Hmm?
the reality is, it actually depends on what the rank of the individual is as well. So I'm not sure that,
That's not, well, the sergeant, a paramedic sergeant and a regular sergeant is the same rate of pay for cost of service.
right,
There's a paramedic, non-paramedic, and sergeant are the three cost of services that we give every year to all of our contracts.
right. But I mean, I guess the cost difference between what the sheriff pays a paramedic or the sheriff's office pays a paramedic and what the sheriff's office pays a standard road patrol deputy, that is significantly minimal in comparison to the difference between the costs and the cost for the shift that we're talking about. So I guess I'm not understanding
Agreed.
this whole line of questioning, because we're talking about the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars versus maybe $10,000.
Right. The point I'm making is that there were other possibilities if you were only addressing the medical response that could have been taken that would have greatly lessened the expenditures for Park Township.
Correct.
If you were purely dealing with just medical, what happens up north, some other smaller places, is the fire chief who's working full-time on the day, just like, so our paramedic deputies are doing deputy things, and when a medical call comes out, they stop what they're doing and they go take the medical. Up north, the fire chief's doing what the fire chief does, the medical comes in, he goes and takes it. At night, you have to address it, so they use their part paid gentlemen, firefighters, I'm sorry, and they either have a truck that they have at one person's house for that night and they go there. That was an option. Now, I'm not saying it was the right option for Park Township. We take no stance on that.
Right.
But that's the cost we're talking about,
Right.
adding 4 employees, and that necessarily doesn't really.
Yes, but I want to be clear, because there are two positions here. All right, there's the position of the township and then there's the position in the sheriff's office. And you are absolutely correct. There is a clear difference in the level of service.
I'm sorry, which level of service?
There's a clear difference in the level of service between a paid on-call response, which would be 10 to 15 minutes, versus an E unit that is in your community that can respond probably within less than 5. So,
Well,
and there's
situation.
correct. No, the average response time for a paid on-call department is between 10 and 15 minutes. The average response time for a full-time department, whether is 4 to 5. So yes, it's situational, but I just want to be clear that what you're saying is absolutely correct. And it's not a but, it's an and there is a difference between the level of service that the E unit provided and the level of service that you're referring to. Because if we look at Port Sheldon, or if we look at the small communities, you're absolutely correct. Those communities where we respond to a medical with paid on call, and that response time is going to be individuals that are either coming from their home and going to the station, picking up a rig and then going to that medical, or coming from their home and going directly from their home to the medical. And that response time is going to be significantly higher. And the board does have that option. There's no question. And there was a time in Park Township's history where that is actually exactly what had occurred. But I want to make sure that when we're comparing things, we're making sure that we understand the level of service difference.
Right, and I think what you're looking at, when you start looking at averages like that, you're neglecting the fact that anything that's priority one, the ones that you need to be there in 3 minutes, we're still going to come to. In fact, the save that we're talking about at Park Mobile, the AED was applied by one of your general deputies, not a paramedic deputy. That was part of that save.
Yep.
So we're still going to return to all priority ones. We're going to come no matter what. Just as we do elsewhere. So when you talk about the increase in response time, there will be one, but it'll generally be for those general illnesses, those slip and falls, not generally slip and falls. Those will come down as priority twos, and we'll still probably go to those if we're available. But the priority threes are going to be those ones that take a little bit longer. So
you're absolutely correct. And then one thing to clarify is these are really important clarifications, and it's really good for the board to have this information. So right now you are a paramedics department now. Those officers are not going to cease to be paramedics, obviously, automatically. But in time, those officers will not have paramedic licenses any longer. And so the ability for those officers, when they get there on those priority ones within 3 minutes, what they can do on those calls is functionally very different than what used to happen.
I'll actually make 2 points to that, one on each side of the argument.
Sure.
I want to be
Please.
Firstly, when we talk about our current paramedics, they're licensed to give medication, they're licensed to innovate. I know the fire department right now is talking about EMTs, which are not able to give.
Correct.
Also, along with that, as soon as they cease operating as paramedics, even if they have the functional knowledge to be paramedics, they only operate under the license of that vehicle.
Correct.
Those vehicles, as soon as we say that they're no longer units, even if Sergeant Rotman, who's been a paramedic for as long as I've known him, is in that car, as soon as that car is not licensed under the state, he can't push drugs and he can't innovate under that license now. So to both points.
Yes. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was looking at the statistics here. And of course, I can't remember the number, so let me pull it up here. So monthly calls, like for March, was 235, is that right?
Sounds about right, sure.
Okay. Now, is there any type of breakdown as to the severity of those?
No, that would be something we would have to, I mean, if that's something you want, it's something I can try and get to see if you have like violent and non-violent crimes or, so the other complication with that, and this is part of a larger discussion on numbers being able to tell you whatever you want them to say.
Yeah.
In fact, I had a whole class in grad school where a whole job was to bring in an article and say 8 different ways that statistic could have been framed. So, I mean, ultimately we can talk about calls and call numbers, but then you can also talk about the severity of the call, how many officers it took to go to the call, how many hours you were on the call. And so we are having anecdotally more complex and violent calls over the course of history. I was looking at some of the numbers that are coming up for this year's annual report. I remember a time where we would go 3-4 years without homicide. And now we're at, between 1 and 4 every year. So, I mean, yes, things are a little bit more complicated, but no, I do not on me have a breakdown of what the calls are. But I can tell you statistically, over the course of the last 20 years, the call volume in Park has stayed pretty even. I was expecting there to be a continued growth throughout, and it stayed right around where it's been over the course of the last 20 years. Now, again, it's growing. You're putting up the world's best pickleball court. I found out last month while I was sitting here, we're going to be drawing more people, and there isn't a week that goes by that somebody doesn't complain about Ottawa Beach Road, because I can lay in bed with my windows open and hear it, and I'm not that close. So, I mean, we have these issues. I'm very hesitant to be in favor of anything that reduces any of our police coverage here. I understand that money is money, but I would really stress that I would be very much behind against any reduction in coverage.
But based on this, it's about 7 to 8 calls per day.
Sure.
With that, I just wanted to note that Ms. Connie, our finance director, Ms. Connie Vanderschaft, provided you a new schedule, and that is on your dais. And the key here is, with probably the exception of number 3, including 2 deputies, no matter what decision the board makes, there will need to be an increase to the public safety millage.
One comment on that. Because we had kind of a back and forth about where that July 1 came in. And I think that was a date that was given very early in the conversations, just so that you know. We are not planning on discontinuing on July 1. It is currently January 1, and for Holland Township, for them to get staffed, trained, run alongside our paramedics for a number of months.
Okay,
And then
just so you, yeah, this is a very, I heard a little bit about it this week, but this is the first time I'm hearing it officially.
Mhm.
We were told July 1 as ideal, and I believe September 1 is drop dead.
Yeah.
So that's what we were communicated, and that's why we were doing what we were doing. So that's new information.
Yep.
But regardless of that, right, that's not going to change the analysis, because the analysis is as such that given the decision on the medical side, and I realize your very clear position that you feel as though it should not be seen as cause and effect, and I can appreciate that. I totally can. That whatever we decide tonight, if you decide to go with 2, 4, 8, whatever that number is, you're going to likely have an increase in the public safety millage, because we will need additional funds to cover that. Now, will that millage increase need to happen day one? Probably not, because I think we can cover it for a year within fund balance, although Connie's a little bit gray on it. We're going back and forth. So there is some flexibility there, but at some point the millage will need to increase. That's the point.
What is the millage right now? I see equated to millage. What is the millage as it stands today?
0.75.
0.75.
Huh? 1.5? 1.5 mils.
Okay.
So the increase to 8, I mean, it's not, I mean, you know, it's talking about, we're not talking about massive increases here, folks. Just so you know, we're not talking about massive tax increases, but an increase is an increase. So on the 8 deputies, anywhere from, you know, 0.2.5 to 0.3.5. And on the lower amount of deputies, anywhere from 0.1 to 0.2. Okay, but again, an increase is an increase. So.
And Holland Charter Township are supporting the 8, is that correct?
So their meeting is next Thursday. I've been speaking with their manager. It sounds like we'll be right around there. Obviously, we're still in talks with Zeeland Township. I spoke with Zeeland Township as a possibility. I'm sorry. There was a possibility. One of the answers was to find another municipality to get in on this group of 8 deputies and 1 sergeant, so as to kind of defer cost and have. For me, it's great because I can move assets within 3 townships instead of just 2. If we have a problem, one of the things that's really great about community policing deputies is that they can be a part of your community and they understand all your issues, and you have a point of contact. One of the bad things is if I have an issue in one area, there's less things that I can move around, because I don't pull the guy out of Park Township if Holland Township's getting, you know, this or that. What this would do is make that pool bigger, so it's better for me, makes a more interesting car. I was there last month. It was a discussion item. I don't know how much traction it got. I've been trying to call Tom back. I'm not hopeful for Zeeland Township. That said, Holland Township sounds like they're pretty supportive of staying. I know there was an email sent that was from Steve. I don't know if that was part of your packet.
It's not, but it was sent to the board.
Okay, yeah. Saying that they were supporting staying with 8. So I'm hopeful for next Thursday that they're going to stay with 8. Otherwise, we're going to have to try and figure out some new math for that. Oh, just, you know, the other change in the last 20 years is when I started, you were working 70 or 60-40 was the split, and it was changed to lower your amount from 40% to 25%. So just as a more fair distribution of things. So that was another change over the history I forgot to mention. The other thing I think we're still working on, but we're looking to try and help the township and the fire department with some savings and some other venues that might be a significant saving to the township through some of our equipment being purchased by the township instead of having to buy new. So we are working to try and get some cost savings for the township through that.
You're welcome to say that.
The boat, one of our patrol boats that has a master stream on the front and gunnels that go down for the dive team is being retired. And it would be sold at a significant savings to township. We are still working. We were trying to get a final approval from fiscal that this would be the appropriate way of getting rid of. It was purchased with a grant. but the 7 years has already expired. So we're working on that with fiscal to get the final okay. But if we can, we'll get it, we will work on getting it to Park Township on a significantly decreased price from what we purchased it at and what you guys were looking at for a fireboat. And it's honestly a fireboat. We just had it for patrol.
And we thank you for that.
Any other questions? I do have one more.
Mhm.
So let's say we went with 4. And bad things happen. What? Does someone come from somewhere else or what happens?
So, yeah, I mean, honestly, if there's, I mean, I call it a bell ringer. If there's an emergency, if there's somebody getting hurt, it doesn't matter if you're Port Sheldon and you don't have a contract or you're Park and you've lowered your contract, you're not keeping one of my deputies from going to save somebody. So if there's an active domestic, if there's shots fired, I mean, I spent 8.5 years here in Park, and I'm not going to tell you I didn't go screaming into Holland Township or one time into Spring Lake, actually Ferrysburg, when a shot was fired at one of my partners up there. There are times when it's all hands on deck, and they'll always be the case. The contract is more for us to keep the guy in there for the patrol time, but any priority one is gonna change things up.
So the person in the patrol, would he pull people over for speeding?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Let's say we went with the 8 and so there was more patrol.
Yeah.
Would they pull people over for speeding?
Yeah. So those units now are just like any other deputy. They just have a couple extra bags in the back, a little extra knowledge in their head. And when a priority one comes, they go there first. Now, if we got rid of that, he's going to continue to be a fully marked, complete police officer, just like any other deputy in the county. Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Recap exactly what we have today, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So Park Township contracts directly with the sheriff's office for one deputy. And that's Deputy Jones. I'm sure you've seen him at the meetings before. You then have a portion of a deputy that's at the school. And I don't have that exact percentage, but generally what happens is he's at the school's in the township. If something big happened outside the school, he'd come. In the summertime, he has some patrol time out here because he's not in school. You then have 25% of the following. One traffic car. Car's all blacked out. It doesn't have lights on the roof. You see him patrolling Otto Beach Road a lot, just writing tickets. 2 sergeants, one in charge of the paramedic unit, one in charge of the community policing unit. You then have 25% of 8 paramedic deputies. Those are the ones that are not going to be paramedics anymore. So they would drop to just general deputies. And that would go whenever we decide, probably first of the year. Past that, you have no other costs to us. However, we still have our general road patrol that covers the whole county. And there's 2 cars that cover this area. So like say Port Sheldon can't afford or doesn't need to afford a paramedic. I'm sorry, a community policing deputy. The general road patrol covers that area for calls for service.
Mr. Supervisor, if I may.
What would be our full-time equivalent then?
FTE was, I'd have to look. What did we have there? I had a bunch of, it was in your packet last month. I had 3.
Yeah, it's probably like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
You got 25% of 8, and then you got 25%. You've got 25% of 8, then you got 25% of 3, then you got 10% of 1. So if anybody's doing math, 25% of 8 would be 2. 25% of 3 would be
0.75.
0.75, and 10% of 1
is 10%.
Is 10%. So what is that? Almost 3?
Almost 3.
Almost 3. Just to be clear for the board, if I may, I am, and obviously this is all a policy decision. From my recommendation, based on what I know and understand in all of the partnerships, I am recommending that we keep the 10% of the school resource officer, that we not touch that. I am recommending that we keep the community policing deputy, which would be Jeff Jones, that we not touch that position. I am recommending that we take the traffic control deputy, 25% of the traffic control deputy, and we keep that. And we keep the 2 paramedic sergeants. the 25% of those paramedic sergeants because those are the supervisors. I think from a policy perspective, the key here, in my opinion, and how I wrote this memo, was that the key policy decision is how many of those 8 would you continue to fund? Is it 25% of 8? Is it 25% of 6? Is it 25% of 4? The other positions, I think, and I can go over each one of those positions and justify why I'm making that recommendation. I think the school resource officer is a valuable consideration, but more importantly, Ottawa County pays 33% of it, which is a good value for us. Of all of the things that we have in Park Township, traffic issues is number 1 on the list. So I'm reluctant in any respect to get rid of the traffic control deputy. Jeff Jones is a phenomenally valuable asset for us as both a community policing officer and somebody who we are able to interface with the sheriff's office and also helps us out on code enforcement. So a number of reasons for that position. And then the 2 sergeants, I acknowledge and respect the sheriff's positions, the sheriff's office position that, you know, if you have these officers out there, there needs to be a command structure and those 2 supervisors need to be present. So again, now we're back to the number of E-unit deputies, which is the big part of the contract. That's my rationale. Which is still 25% of 8, correct? And that is on page 79 of your packets.
On a millage increase, when do you suggest that if the starting point is January 1 to 5, when would we, I guess the treasurer, but is this not a votable thing? We're actually assessing, correct? If we So we, in preparation for this change, would we do a vote in fall of 25 or spring of 25 then?
So
It's sometime.
in order to answer that, I need to know when the current millage expires.
The current millage expiration is further out. The problem is we're gonna be upside down. So
when exactly does that millage expire?
Connie, what's the L4029 tell us? That's my recollection of it.
So we're looking at 2026, right?
I think,
and we're talking about January 1 of 2025.
Right.
So we're talking about 1 year to make a decision about whether or not we're spending too much money and whether or not we need to increase our levy.
correct.
So I'm finding that this distills down to being less of a puzzle than I thought it was.
Right. I mean, once we make this,
I'm ready to make a motion.
once we make this decision, we will come back in a month or 2, if we need a month off on these. We will come back in a month or 2 and analyze those numbers and give you what we think the millage increase should be and when we should put it on the ballot.
So puzzle, you left me hanging. So the puzzle in your perspective is stay as is with the 8.
Go
over the chip fly.
Go with the 8. We've got then we have a year to determine how much our millage should be in a renewal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
And we have spent as a board a considerable amount of time over the last 6-8 years reducing taxes. And we have a couple of things on our agenda tonight where recommendations are being made that we increase taxes. So I want to make sure that we know exactly what that number should be. If we have to increase taxes, I don't want to increase them a penny more. That's absolutely necessary.
Right.
So my suggestion again would be, my motion will be, when I make it, is going to be that we go with the 25% of 8. That we do a real tight analysis again. I'm sorry, Connie, again, January 1st. see exactly where we need to be and then go for a millage in either the August, November election, whenever this expires.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking it's 2026. Okay, does that,
January of what year? You're talking about 20,
January 2025,
that's when this is gonna start.
Right.
We won't have any exposure until that time.
that's correct, I think. Is that,
We will not
am
be
I,
on this
am I,
plan
am I
until-
reading that right?
we will not be on this plan until January of 2025.
So that gives us a year
So which is January 26th.
to be able to determine if we're underwater, then we'll take it out of general fund. And we'll be able to determine exactly what our millage increase should be in 2026.
Right, which could be in August, December, whatever. you
Right,
decide.
August or November, even May. Does that,
Yeah, so then clarification on that, then, does that delay the hiring of the full-time fire officers? The firemen, because if there's no change in the EMT coverage until January 1, we end up having more time to hire that expertise onto the fire team.
I think that's gonna need to be evaluated over the next week or two. Like, this is the first time I'm confirming that it's not July 1, it's January 1 at the end of the year. We have already put out the ad.
Oh, yeah.
So-
I know this process, and somebody can.
But we can delay the hire.
Slow motion.
Correct.
And may I
And so
speak to
I
that?
think we will, and there will be a new financial analysis on that. We will still need a millage increase. The numbers are gonna change a little bit because you've got that 6-month lag time. They're not gonna change that much. But they're gonna change. I mean, it's 6 months. Just know that, I would say that Connie's analysis is still probably gonna be relatively accurate in terms of
always is.
in terms of the increase that you're gonna need. Now, it might go down a little bit because you're gonna have that 6 month of lag. But you're still gonna need those increases.
Well, if I can make a comment about operations on that, we'll work with the chief as far as however long he needs to get operational in that next, 6 months so that he can fine tune his operation and see how they want to do that. If hours need to change or whatever that looks like, while we keep taking priority medical calls. I know Holland Township is starting the process of hiring and training. But that was part of our plan with them, was to get them up and running alongside them so that there's never a gap in coverage, because that's going to be unacceptable. And then when we feel as a group, Holland Township, Park Township, and the sheriff's office, that you guys are all ready to operate through the fire office or the fire departments, then we will begin the process of moving some of those paramedics into Georgetown, where they need a little bit more time. They're not quite as prepared to take over medical operations because of some other issues. So.
Can I ask how long the contract with the county is? Do we do yearly contracts or 3 years, 5 years? What do we do?
We renegotiated it with Mr. Huntsberger, and I just do not know what the terms were.
So the terms are that we update your cost of service every year. In fact, you just got your cost of service increase. But at any time, the township can cancel with 30 days note. I think it's 30 days. There's or maybe 90 days, but there's a period of time to give us time. But also at any point in time, we have to have a conversation on what coverage looks like, whether that be adding coverage or subtracting coverage. That's a phone call to me and a sit down that we can talk about. During this process, another township wanted a bigger stake in one of their cars, and one in Holland Township didn't want that stake in that. They had a 12% stake in a car, and Blendon wanted it. We just talk it through, make sure everybody's on board. We bring it in front of the boards that need to be brought in front of it. We make those adjustments.
Okay, but what is the normal contract period normally?
Your cost of service goes up every year.
Yeah.
And that just, it's in perpetuity.
So it's really not a contract.
No, so when changes needed to be made in the old way of doing things, every contract for the county has to be brought in front of the board. And there was no ability for us to add cars that didn't take 2 or 3 months to bring it in front of finance and then bring it in front of the county. So you are entered into a contract that says this is the terms of the contract based on exhibit A, and we can change exhibit A as we need to. And that's kind of how, that was the kind of the brilliance of that contract that was kind of gone through and renegotiated a number of years ago. So yes, it's a yearly contract for cost of service, but it can be canceled with proper notice.
Skipping your motion, if you're gonna put a date of review, you might want to think about that, putting on a fiscal year so that we can review it in April rather than January. So we have literally 15 months worth, but we have a full fiscal year, because I'm sure the first 3 months are gonna be adjusted and getting everybody up and running, made, and I have all 8 deputies at that time, so this is just thought, yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we enter into an agreement or continue our agreement with the Sheriff's Department at the level of 8 deputies and 1 sergeant. And that we reevaluate our costs as they phase out with our next budget cycle. And be prepared to increase our millage if necessary at renewal.
May I just say for clarification, because you do have 8 deputies and 1 sergeant in the unit, but there's also deputies in traffic and whatnot. If the clarification would be as is current, may clarify
that we continue the services as they are currently being provided by the Idaho County Sheriff's Department.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
I'll support that.
Any other questions, discussion? I will just say this, when you break it down to FTEs, if we didn't go with the 8, we'd have less than 1 FTE for the township. Right. Which is a little more perspective. So
Thank you. Good observation.
So anyway, any other questions, comments?
I just want to say thank you to Sergeant or the Chief and County for all the analysis. This is a complicated issue, and I appreciate all the effort put in this.
So good. All right. All right. Well, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good.
Talk to you soon on the next action item.
Don't go too far.
I will.
All right. Now we're gonna move on to item C, bicycle infrastructure. And is Brian here to comment on this?
He is
I don't
not.
see him, so, okay.
He is unfortunately under the weather with his kids, also under the
Oh, that's
weather.
too bad.
Yep.
Okay, so based on this, I'm seeing that we're going to put a cement trailhead pad there regardless. It's just the board gets to determine, do we want to put anything on that pad, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
And the pad will also need to be included in the cost, but we don't have, we'll ask for those costs to be quoted from the concrete that we're pouring right now at the site. That's not in your packet. So just know that, we will, there will be an additional cost for the pad itself. That's not included in your memo.
I did have one question. One of the items on here was a pump,
Yeah, an air pump.
but I don't see any paper on this as to cost. Did I miss it?
$1,232.
Right, but
Second page.
There's no picture.
You're correct.
I was
Oh, it's
looking
on the
for a-
page where the picnic table picture is.
No, but I was looking for a picture. What is it? What does a pump like that look like? Does it have an air compressor?
This was Brian's project, so I'm not aware.
No, in their page.
Air station, is there?
Yeah,
Is it the repair station?
repair stand, bicycle repair thing.
It says
That's
air
different
pump,
than-
1,232. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what.
Yeah.
I don't, is that come with a compressor? Does anyone know? And the other question I had for the water station, does that include cost of running water over there?
No, it does not.
So that's additional cost.
Plus, plus water usage for all the soccer kids.
But that will be, that will be worked out when we're actually currently designing and currently talking through the details of the bathroom facility out there and the water out to the pickleball. So that will be on that line. But yes, that those costs are not included.
I also have a question on the trash cans. We, through the whole park, would want them uniform, right?
Correct.
So is this what we're choosing for the whole park? That's an expensive trash can, $600.
That's about what the trash cans are
Yeah.
that is literally what trash cans cost. Commercial grade park trash cans are that type of cost.
It's because they're recycled, UV protected
Yeah,
plastic that won't rot, splinter or
yeah.
crack.
I just want to make sure that this is the one we're gonna use in the whole park and we don't have to, you know.
Yeah.
I would suggest that we pause on the water. At that site. We can always put it in later, but if we're gonna have a bathroom about 100 yards away, fully forward. You know, and so I hesitate making this too elaborate. The stand is nice, the air pump, the repair station is nice, but I will keep it simple. The only question I have is, when I first read it and then observed outside, when you say next to the trash cans. Is there a location that you're 20 feet away? Even though the tree, location.
Yeah, we can do that.
You know, I would respect Ryan, you know, location.
Yeah, that's
A
fine.
little more beautiful, you know, our bike started in places next
Yeah.
to the trash.
That's fine. You're that's a good point. We'll move it a little bit to the what direction is that? To the north, yeah.
I don't know if I dare make another comment or not. The bicycle repair stand, it looks like a piece of metal to hold a bicycle up.
That is exactly
For
what it is.
$1,100.
That's exactly what it is.
Can we not have something like that made a lot cheaper?
Usually those things do not get made cheaper. Buying those things the way they are is typically the most cost-effective way to do it.
It is fairly standard in biker. Yeah, community outreach areas for bikers, it is a standard thing, so that they have small tools, repair bike, it's little things that with the bikers. It is kind of a standard thing you can see around many communities in front of, you know, parks and bike stores and stuff. If you go down Bellow City on River, they have one in front of their store as well. They're exciting.
Some smart entrepreneur.
Yeah, they're built to last. I mean, they're.
So that's what I was gonna ask as well as how often does a bike repair station and air pump actually need it?
Yeah, the first one I'm using.
Yeah. I'm not sure the pump is necessary.
Yeah.
Because most bikers who are touring probably have one of those nice little hand pumps.
Right.
Stuck on their front fork, right?
Right.
No, it's good, that kind of dates you just a tip. Most bikers, I'll just update you, most bikers have a CO2 tube that's in the little bag underneath, and so it immediately pumps up.
That's considerably better. So it fits with your patch kit, right?
So, yeah, just,
And your wrenches.
I appreciate your old school solution to that.
I just assumed it was.
I think we've established with this board already that I'm older than you don't have to.
I'm opposed.
Plus, there's a gas station across the street with an air pump.
I would recommend.
Right.
It's fine.
I'm opposed to the air pump and the water station for a couple of reasons, right? If it's an air pump, then we gotta get electricity out there, we're gonna maintain it, we gotta get the hose, we gotta get all this stuff, right? And I just think it's an ongoing expense that we don't need to incur.
That's what I said.
And the same thing with water.
Manual, I don't have a problem.
So,
It's fine.
I will confess that I kind of like the idea of the picnic table
Yes.
and the bike stand. It fits in. Regardless of how modern.
Does the repair stand come with tools or you have to supply your own tools?
Those tools. The little.
Is it under lock so nobody's gonna steal them?
No, they're attached on those strengths, and so.
Oh,
If
okay.
you have an Allen wrench, or it's like an Allen wrench, a number of Allen wrenches
Yeah.
typically, because that's what the bikes are today.
And where did you say there was one? I want to go look.
Right in front of the Belleville City Bikes on River
Okay.
Avenue, just next to the library.
Thanks.
Kind of orange. Yeah, well, it's like this.
Right, we'll look for a motion.
I make a motion, I make a motion that we support the construction of a small bike facility that includes a bike repair stand, table, and cement pad. I think that's all.
Trash can?
Yeah, trash can. Yes. And, yeah, it's supposed to be fixed.
Yep. And a nice sign.
Oh, yeah, as soon as.
Yeah, of course. Not a bad sign,
Right.
not average sign. Nice.
I'll second that motion since nobody else said.
Right, any other questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, now we're gonna move on to. Let's see, the approval of the ballot language for the bike path millage. You can see that before us. So,
So, if I may, Mr. Chair.
sure.
So in front of you, we have an analysis. In the audience is our maintenance director, Ryan Bromley, and Connie as well, if we have any questions from a cost perspective. We've looked at this as a team. We are making this recommendation as a team. We are asking that the board increase the levy from 0.4 to 0.55. Here's the rationale for that. One of sorry about that. One of your board members, nope, that's not it. Asked why would we increase the millage if our estimated fund balance would be sufficient at the 0.4. And the rationale for that is when you look at your asset management plan and we look at the age of our infrastructure, we really need to be thinking a little bit more than 5 years out. There are a number of plans that we know and identify that will need to be resurfaced in the next iteration of the millage increase. If we don't add a little bit extra now, we're going to be behind the 8 ball later. Therefore, I'm making a recommendation to go from 0.4 to 0.55 as opposed to a smaller just 0.5 increase, because I need to, or I think we need to build up some fund balance so that when those paths come due and we need to resurface those paths, we'll have money in the bank to do that. If we don't do that, we'll have to raise the millage higher in the next iteration. And so it's easier from a resident perspective to have small increases over time than large increases all at once. That's the general rationale for that. Again, Mr. Bromley is in the audience. If you had any specific questions on the conditions or particular paths, this also includes retaining walls. A number of retaining walls are failing, and so we need to be diligent to make sure that that infrastructure is continuously upgraded. Later on in the meeting, we have a large project on one of the paths and some retaining walls as well. These are things that we look at every year, and we continue to upgrade our infrastructure. So with that, I will take any questions if the board has them.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. One comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'd just like to point out 2 things, I guess. The significant difference between 5 mils and 55 mils is for the average taxable value is $25 compared to $16. I don't sound like a whole lot, but it is. But if you look at 0.5 mils, the ending balance, fund balance for the deal is $1 million. At 5.5, it's $1.3 million. $1 million sitting in our bike fund sounds like a pretty significant amount of money to me.
Until you look at the costs of asphalt and repairing those, it's not going to be.
For the next 5-year considerations, which is the millage will be due to be renewed at that time anyway. So why are we expanding to have another $300,000 just sitting in the bank for future? I think we need to keep our tax base as low as we can and $10 is $10.
I respectfully understand the comment. It's more of a policy position than it is a right and a wrong. I don't disagree with you. It just means that come that renewal, we may have to have a slightly larger increase because of the cost of maintaining that asset. No, from the residents' perspective, the funds have to stay in the bike path fund. Dollars that go in the bike path fund stay in the bike path fund and are used for bike paths and retaining walls. We have maybe one or two additional paths that may happen in the future. It's very unlikely that you will see any new paths built or very many new paths. Now we are into the maintenance and maintaining the existing pathway that you have. The one caveat that I would make in all due respects to Mr. Trustee DeHaan, I absolutely don't disagree with what he is saying. One thing I'd like to point out is if you look at the master plan, and Ms. Mika Weiss is in the audience, and if you read the comments in the master plan, you will find that the number one asset that people love in this community is the bike path. And the number one asset that people say we need to do a better job of maintaining is the bike paths. It's a big deal for a lot of people. So again, does that mean if you went with 0.5, we would not be able to maintain it? No. It just means that in the next iteration, we might recommend a slightly larger increase than we normally would.
I would agree that it's appropriate to get ahead of it instead of do something that will catch up later on. The question I would go back to Howard is what's the discipline to maintain that those funds stay in reserve until they're used 4, 5, 7 years from now? Because I think again, I agree they stay in the fund balance, but human nature is if there's money in the bank, to spend the money in the bank. You know, I just want to make sure, hey, you have a plan to a number. To Terry's point, I think $300,000, I think is a smart to put in and say, okay, we anticipate $1 million in 2027. Okay, that 3 or 4 years, we're to that $1 million in a rate to go and actually do it. It sets up the next board, the next season of repair for those bike paths in a very constant way. And so I just want to make sure we have that $1 million in reserve.
Sure.
What's the discipline that you're going to have? There's new special ones. Okay, this is the future, like the future.
Yeah.
Repair bill. We can have what 55 miles.
Yeah.
Like
I think there is a way to do that. Connie, would we be able to do an analysis and then take a dollar amount and restrict it on the books in the fund balance? So it's a restricted fund balance and we tie that number to a particular year in the asset plan, or a particular future set of years, or maybe even a particular pathway that somehow is restricted?
How about the board just shows some fiscal responsibility and say, this is what this is for? I mean, you can't, ultimately, if we have before us the asset management plan like we should, okay, we shouldn't need that. I mean, you can't, I don't know how you restrict funds in a millage-based fund, when we should just know we've got this coming. I mean, it's kind of like saying, well, we don't trust ourselves, so we got to do this. Let's just say.
But I think it's a good policy to say, okay, there's a line on the bottom that says every year we see it growing.
Right.
And it's for, to say it's for future repaying. I mean, I think right now, it's kind of, okay, pull it out, like, we're not spending it. Right. So we truly have to do it in 2027, 28, 29.
I would rather just put on the blind, here's what's coming due in this particular year, and know that that's coming due. So
we have to also realize that each year our taxable values go up and more tax money comes in from the millage.
Yeah, but heavily reduces it.
Right.
So let's not overstate that.
But I mean, you're still, if we approved, like we approved the for the sheriff department tonight, if we go with the 8, it could be 0.35 mils. If we approve this, it's a 0.15 mil. That brings us up a whole half a mil to our taxpayers.
Mhm.
I guess the only thing I'd like to add to the conversation, a 0.55 mil increase for that, the bike pass is about $850, I think, $1,000 a year. We have 55 miles of bike path, and it looks like it's costing about $200,000 per mile to have those things resurfaced. That gets us about a 12-year window for resurfacing 55 miles of bike path. It's important to the township. The people are saying very clearly, hey, this is something that we want. This is something that we enjoy. I think 12 years out of a bike path is probably pretty reasonable. I don't know if we get much more than that before it needed to be resurfaced. It seems reasonable to ask that with the intention of, look, we have an asset here that we're going to maintain over time, and that's what it costs to do it. And if we're not willing to make that kind of a statement, if you will, with the township, and if the township's not willing to do that, then that tells us that we have too much bike path for the dollars that we have coming in. The 0.55 seems reasonable given the miles of bike path that we have and the desire to maintain it at a safe, usable level.
The cost, the other thing, thank you. The cost of repair of bike paths has gone up astronomically in the last 3 to 4 years. And in fact, we don't have Mr. Ken Bosman in the audience, but if we had, you could compare the numbers, 5 years ago to the numbers today of what reconstruction of bike paths is, and it's significantly increased. Not just the cost of asphalt, but the cost of labor.
Right.
When would this request go on the ballot? So it would be in effect for our winter tax bill
No,
this year?
it expires in December. As I recall, Danielle, am I right on that? It expires in December, so it would not be on the winter tax.
So it would be a whole year away. Okay.
Winter tax bill goes out in December, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, your delay,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
We wouldn't be collecting it in this next winter. It would
The
be
year after,
following winter. December of 2025.
Correct.
Right.
You're still going to be at 0.4 for another year.
All right, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll look for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to increase the bike pass levy to 0.55.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, if I may,
Yes.
the ballot language in the resolution has some blank spots that would be fairly easy to fill in. So we've talked about raising it from, I think, the 4 mils to the 0.55 as provided in the motion. You would need to also include the language, and I'm going to pull back up, of the estimated revenue that would be generated. And this is on page 87 under the 0.55 mils. The estimated tax revenue would be $854,641 in the first year. So that would be added to the end of that ballot language, and I can work with Danielle to make sure that it goes there properly.
Would you do that, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But just so you guys understand that the ballot language itself has to have that information in it, right down to blank spaces, so that you can figure out what you wanted to do. But that's how it's gonna be finalized in the resolution that you're approving.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Martin.
you. All right, any other comments? All right, yeah. You were.
Oh,
Giving the high sign? Okay, the high sign, all right. Okay, so does this need to be a roll call?
Second.
Or no, because it's a resolution, only if it's an ordinance,
If
correct?
it's an ordinance,
All right,
we can do it if you want to.
no, that's right, okay. All right, all those in favor say aye. Yeah.
Aye, sorry, thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1. All right, now we're gonna move on to E. Thank you much to the planning commission and to the representatives here. Appreciate your efforts in this.
Good evening. So you have in your packet, the ordinance that was passed by the planning commission to update the side path ordinance to deal with e-bikes and just other things that are new in our community. So e-bikes are specifically addressed. It also changes some definitions to bring some things up to date, to clarify the language. It brings micromobility into the ordinance, micromobility meaning everything from the scooters to the one wheels that people are on and all that sort of thing. The main thing that the ordinance does, in addition to updating some of that language, is to establish a speed limit for the bike paths, and it was determined to set that at 15 miles per hour. There was some discussion at the planning commission. One of the things that they talked about was with e-bikes, as we mentioned before, there are 3 classes of e-bikes that have different levels of functionality, different top speeds with the assist. And so I'll let Dave speak to this more if you would like, but the planning commission ultimately decided not to limit the type of e-bike or the class of e-bike on the paths, and instead to just say, we're going to have this as a speed limit, and regardless of what you're riding, this is what you should be riding. So that's just something to be aware of in the ordinance. So do you have questions?
I didn't see a strategy for signage to share that with the public who swings in from another township or from the city.
Yeah, so I've been working on that signage and had hoped to have something for you today. I've identified about 10 locations for larger signage. I think there's a question that'll be how much you want to see to make that determination on how frequently we need to have this larger signage. The larger signage would be more like potentially, here's a map, this is where you are, and here are the courtesy rules, this is what you need to follow, that sort of thing. There could also be smaller signs that would be more frequent. I don't know if any of you have been down in the Indianapolis area along the Monon Trail. They have a lot of really good signage out there. Some of them are smaller and have just kind of the basics. So for us, it would be something like, here are the yielding rules. Bikes yield to pedestrians, 15 miles an hour, that sort of thing, just more frequently. Another thing that I saw up in Traverse City at Tart Trails, they have portable signs that they move around. Those are a lot more fun, like the type of signs that are funny and have punchlines, but they communicate the same sort of message, which is slow down, be considerate, have a good time, and kind of add a good spirit. One of the things I like about those is that you can address specific areas if you're having issues with that. So that's the sort of package that we're looking to put together and bring to you in the next probably month, I would say.
Yeah, we were hopeful to have it. Mika and I have talked about it over the last week or two. We were hopeful we would have something, but we were not for sure. But yes, within the next month or two, we will have a signage plan, and then that will be implemented this spring and summer.
One of my inputs to the Ottawa County Park plan, when they were asking input for the public and received the notice, was there should be some consistency of signage throughout the county. So I always encourage cooperation with the county. I mean, you go up Lakeshore, we'll have signs, Port Charlotte has signs, Grand Haven has signs. All of us should have a similar sign. It'd be nice if the Ottawa County Park System became more of a player coach on signage. I think we've all been to places around the country where you go on a trail for 30, 40, 50 miles, and the signage is similar, it's all makes sense, but they're going through various municipalities. So I hesitate becoming the solution set for signage without communicating with a larger entity in our, our town, our county. Maybe we lead them to something that we target to them, lead them towards a preferred future. But I certainly wouldn't do it independently if they're already working.
Well, I want to say before Mika jumps in, we have a real gem in front of us because this is Mika's expertise. Mika started an organization around bike path advocacy. So I'm very lucky to be able to have Mika on the point person on this, and she loves bike path and bike stuff, and so yeah, we've got a real gem on that. So go ahead, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I haven't communicated. I was thinking of doing this previously. I haven't communicated yet with our adjacent communities, but I think that would be a great idea to reach out to them to say this is what we're doing. One of the things I looked at when putting together the courtesy and care rules, which are guidelines, and I think that also in the ordinance. So that's something that this is probably what this would look like. The ordinance writes that that's something that would be determined ultimately by staff, approved by the township manager. So it wouldn't have to go through the legislative process anytime we wanted to change it. I looked at several different iterations. They're relatively similar. So I think that there's kind of a standard that's out there already. And if we reflect that standard, and then we can maybe encourage our neighboring communities to say, hey, let's line up on this.
I want to make one additional comment, and maybe it goes without saying, maybe others will take issue with it. I want to be clear that while we are passing this ordinance, our officers are not going to be out on the bike paths with radar guns. This is somewhat you will, I'm sure. And I saw actually in the back, there was a little was back there kind of making a radar gun point to the undersheriff. This is going to be a largely self-enforced type of issue. Not to say that if there's not an egregious violation and an officer sees it, he won't do anything about it or she won't do anything about it. But just know we're not going to be actively out there having radar guns on bikes. So,
any other comments?
I have one, that now that we just approved the bike path millage to go to vote, when we look at this, ordinance, it doesn't say bike path. It says sidewalk, side path, or path. Is that something we need to consider?
It's a Dan question.
Potentially, again, you're looking at the definitions of where this is going to be enforced. There was question before about whether or not the bike path millage referred to a non-motorized path. And I think somewhere along the lines, the township changed that language. May have been the last millage or maybe even the millage before that. So it kind of more from a non-motorized path to bike path, which could allow e-bikes, is what this ordinance is trying to do. And so I think the language is somewhat fluid. I think if you get into the position where you are going to have to enforce something, violation of it, we would be able to argue to the judge that this is a bike path, it is a side path, however you want to describe it.
Could we kind of put that word bike path in the ordinance?
Well, you draft the ordinances ultimately and approve them. You could define it however you actually want to.
I just want to make it cohesive, We're trying to clean up ordinances, not make them more confusing.
Mm-hmm. The language of side path is something that's being adopted more by the MAC. And we're trying to be exactly with the cleaning up the language to figure out what this is an emerging area. What are we going to call this? And so I want to make sure that we're consistent when it comes to millage language and so forth. Also, it's more than a bike path. It's a lot of things path. So, but we can add any kind of language. I think I would want to hear probably from Dan on what the best way forward would be to make that sort of amendment.
As side path is defined in the ordinance, it is essentially the same thing that a bike path would be in terms of within the street right of way or immediately adjacent to it, that is separated from the roadway and being used for pedestrians, bicycles, e-bikes, and other things that would be authorized. So it's describing the same thing, even though it's using different terms.
Yeah. I would suggest that no matter what we call it in our ordinances, what we call it in any other language, to the people who live here, it's always going to be the bike path. It's
Right.
gonna be a colloquialism.
Right.
As long as we live, so I don't think that's an issue.
I wouldn't recommend changing it on the millage language. I think in the ordinance, it's different. The ordinance becomes more technical and more aligned with, again, what the MAC is doing and what is happening in the industry and that language. The millage language should be bike path, because I think if you start putting in side path in the millage language, people are not going to know what they're voting on. And I'd much rather have people understand what they're voting on. If Dan is comfortable with it saying bike path and the ordinance says side path but defines a bike path, I think we're fine.
Okay, I'm
Just say
okay.
also known as.
Could you put IE bike path?
In the village. Are you saying in the village language or in the ordinance? Village. I would not change, you just approve the village language, you'd have to
Yes.
go back and rechange it. I would
Yeah.
not recommend changing the village language
Leave it
at all. Right, and the fact that this ordinance is regulating the same area, even though it might be known by a different name. If anything, I would change the ordinance language to include bike paths, but I don't think it's necessary because it's describing the same thing. Just using a different definition. I could get myself into a whole lot of trouble by saying hotel, motel. You know, we can sort of.
Okay, just a question, if you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, any other comments?
Before you vote, I have a couple of comments.
Okay.
One is to keep in mind that the technology is ahead of the infrastructure. So when one of the thoughts was on the, was it type 3, I believe, bikes that go 28 miles an hour. A former commissioner once commented, are you going to tell grandma and grandpa they can't ride their bike on the bike path? So if somebody had a type 3, we don't want to be pushing them into the road because there aren't bike lanes on all the roads. We want them on the bike paths. At 15 miles an hour, right? Same as on a highway. If the speed limit's 60 or 70, people go 85, but the speed limit is 15, and I would hope people respect that. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your work.
Yes. Any other comments? Otherwise, this is an ordinance, so we get to do roll call.
Your favorite.
Trustee DeHaan. Yes. Trustee Jones.
Yes.
Trustee Surley.
Yes.
Trustee Spluha.
Yeah.
Madam Treasurer.
Yes,
Clerk votes yes. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. All right, now we're gonna move on to the master plan. You guys did some incredible work here, and when I read through this, I thought, I'm really glad I live in Park Township.
Yep.
This was fantastic. Appreciate all your hard work on this. Wonderful job.
We heard that a lot from people in
Sure.
the surveys and in the community outreach. And that was a really wonderful part of the experience, was just talking to people and going through and hearing all the things that people love. That was really a wonderful thing to see. Love the nature, love the agricultural feel, love the residential community. That was really wonderful to see. So I'm going to briefly go over kind of what the process was and generally what some of the changes were, and then allow our chairperson a chance to say anything else you'd like as well. So the Planning Commission started this process immediately at the end of the short-term rentals ordinance writing process, jumped directly into it, worked on the mission, worked on the vision. That was something that was part of the existing plan. I think when we started it, we thought that there were going to be more changes than we ended up making, but really found that the values are still there. The values are still the same. There are just some changes to bring it into the present to tighten up some language and whatnot. Also brought in experts in a lot of different fields, so the Planning Commission would have a deeper understanding of the issues as they discuss them. So agriculture and transportation and housing, climate and sustainability, had people into several meetings just to explain this is how agricultural preservation works. This is what they've done in this location. Here are some of the challenges. We had a focus group and reached out as well to our blueberry growers. That was an interesting one, and that's going to be something that's an ongoing kind of work in progress. I know that there's a farmland preservation committee that is going to be getting started pretty soon to help address some of those issues as well. So started out with a lot of that stuff. The changes that were made are primarily cleaning up the structure. There were a few changes to the future land use map. I think one of the most noticeable is the addition of utilities boundary, which is really just a sewer line boundary saying we're not going to extend the sewer system north of James or west of 152nd. That's generally where the line is. Sewer extensions are one of the ways that development is encouraged. And so that's one of the farmland preservation techniques that the Planning Commission voted to move forward. So we've been working through some of what that means on kind of a day-to-day basis.
On a practical level.
A practical level, yeah. Also, some of the future land use map in the past was geared more towards some of that future development north of James for the larger lot zoning. There were a few of those that were changed to reflect the current zoning and the current use, which is active agriculture. That's in the future land use map. There were a couple other spots where there are current nodes of small commercial development and residential development, and the past future land use map had those noted for low density development, which is a less intense use than they are. This is mainly on the eastern edge of the township, where it runs into Holland Charter Township. The future land use map was shifted in order to just reflect the current use that's there and say, yep, this is an area that we're okay with having, you know, like a couple offices here and a couple of apartment buildings here. This is a good place to put that sort of thing. Other than that, I think that those were the main changes and the main adjustments. I will pass this off to Mr. Kleinens, and then if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer those as well.
I'll just echo what people say. I think staff did a great job on this, Mika and Hari both. And I think the commissioners did a really good job. We did a good job starting with vision and mission and having that inform us on everything that followed from it, working through that to get to goals and then getting to the future land use map. I think the rewrite is an improvement in that the functional parts of the master plan, which is primarily the goals in the land use map, are at the beginning where they're easy to find. And I think it'll be more usable for whoever has to use it, people in the township or developers. I think that's the primary thing. Of course, this will have to be done again in 5 years. So, but we'll enjoy it while it lasts. There was one other change which I think is interesting. In the future land use map, the zoning types don't exactly align with what's in the actual zoning. So in the housing, the low density residential, medium and high, the medium is single and two family housing. And that used to be lumped in with the high density in the future land use map. We changed it to lump in with the low density, which is R3, the typical. What that does is that you can look at the R3 and look for smaller lots. This fits in with housing and affordable housing. So for instance, if you have sewer and water in R3 by the future land use, somebody could apply and say, I want to put in a medium density in the R3 district. Well, that's now in the future land use map, which means you could have an 8,500 square foot lot if they had both sewer and water, which might lead to developments with more affordable housing. And that seems like kind of a sleeper to me that might have a big effect in the long run. Anything else? That's about it. Good. Any questions? Feel free.
Any questions?
Can I start?
Sure.
Yeah, I think Mika is in her memo to us. Not giving herself enough credit on some of this, and it's more than just a refresh. Probably not a good term to use. There's significant changes that were implemented, and primarily mission, vision, and goals, and values. The previous plan only had a vision, So all that was developed. And so the mission and values and goals that are placed in the master plan reflect directly to the master plan, not township overall. But they complement each other as we've developed both of them with Lynn being the primary driver on that. So, and then I would just say that the goals are more robust than they were previously. So we have policy in there, we have objectives in there, we have what the board might want to do, practical things that we need to think about in the future is in that goal section also. I would just say, as you read it, think about what the impact will be as you read the mission, as you read the goals. What is the long-term impact that's going to occur as a result of our 5-year plan, and what we need to do as a board as a result of that? Some of the things that are going to kind of bubble up to us, and it's a good example of that I'd like to just share with you is that the planning commission put together is already defined in the utilities. There's really no growth north of James Street. If we don't have it, so everything is infill. In fact, goal 4 is develop infill. If we're not developing a large additional subdivisions within Park Township period, well, then our assessed values are not going to increase significantly either, which means our revenue is probably going to go flat. So with smaller growth, we need to think about that in the long term, what it's going to do to us 5 years from now with that kind of thing. So I'm just giving that as an example of things that you can think about as you read this, not only the goal, but as you read the entire plan, what the impact to us is going to be into Park Township. And some of that's going to be very subtle, some of it's going to be very obvious. So just my thoughts.
Yeah. Any other comments? All right, we will look for a motion to distribute to the surrounding municipalities.
So move.
Support.
Any other discussion, questions? Right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you both again. Thank you. Thank the planning commission as well. Fantastic job. Impressive. It was definitely worth the wait.
Yeah, I want to say, I want to thank the planning commission. We just adopted, and I realize it hasn't been officially adopted by the board yet. We'll go through this process and then it'll come back to us. We just did the significant step of the first farmland preservation in Ottawa County. That's something to be proud of. I think that there's some real value there. Having the sewer boundaries in this master plan, 10 years ago, the planning commission identified the exact same boundaries, except they didn't put it in as a boundary. They identified the same streets and they identified the same issue, but there's no boundary. Doing what is a utility boundary is putting farmland preservation in Park Township on the map and saying it's something that is valued in our community. And I think, no matter what ends up ultimately getting approved, I think I want to congratulate the planning commission on going through that analysis and digging into that issue. I think it's a really important, valuable issue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to move on to item G, permission for the fair board to have some fireworks. We'll look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Support. Any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Now we're going to move on to H. We need to approve the resurfacing of the bike path on 160th. So we'll look for a motion.
And retaining.
And retaining.
Move to approve.
Right. Any comments, discussion? Right, all those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed? All right. And then item I, the reappointment of Stephanie Trela to the Planning Commission. We'll look for a motion for that. Support. Any discussion, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. And you're back out.
So see you all. I have two things real quick. First of all, I want to thank you for triggering my PTSD by reminding me of my time chasing segways down the bike path. And secondly, about being a part of a very contentious master plan project that I came in the middle of and finished. And I will commend you guys on an unbelievable addition, improvement on what we did a long time ago. Some of those things weren't even thought of, but even if they had been there, we didn't know about it. So it's amazing what you guys are doing. So thank you for that as a resident. So with that said, let's talk about flock safety cameras. So what you have in front of you is a quote for 6 flock security cameras. So what's going on is Ottawa County is kind of doing the same thing it does with our patrol. There's a base level of service that we're providing, and then townships, if they want to add additional coverage, they can. As we go on, we'll try and update our systems as well. But flock security cameras are kind of an advanced license plate reader type camera. So what will happen is there are about 15 of them that are going out throughout the county right now. We look at traffic points and places where we have people coming in and out of the county, or areas that we have significant traffic, and this camera goes up and it takes a picture and develops from that picture what they call a fingerprint of that vehicle. So that's the license plate for sure, but also the make, model, color, any stickers on the back, and it stores that fingerprint in a searchable database for 30 days. When they're owned by the police, which is what we have, they are run through the state and national computer to see if they are wanted in any missing persons, kidnappings, stolen cars, murders, anything like that. When those hits occur, they go out to all the deputies' department issued phones, and we are told where that car on that hot list is, and we can make arrangements to try and get it picked up or stopped. Also, along with just that wanted list that goes out through the state, we can make our own hot lists. If, say, there was a person of interest that hasn't risen to the level of an arrest yet, we can put it on the hot list if we're looking for them. So it'll let us know where they're at so that we can talk to them on that. Mostly, this has been used. Holland City's already got a system. We have access to kind of when their hits come up because of a sharing that we have with them. It has led to us solving numerous crimes within the night. So we get a call out of a break-in, and the neighbor says, I saw a red GMC pickup truck going north right afterwards, and we can type in red GMC pickup truck, search, and we get a plate number. We find out who that person is or where their car is, and we can follow that from there. So that's flock in kind of a quick nutshell, and I'll answer any questions in just a second. What we're looking to do is, like Holland Township is contemplating putting on a number of cameras as well. Allendale is in negotiations as well, and Park had stated that they were interested in at least looking what that looks like. There's an initial startup cost for the permitting to put it on for the road commission or Department of Transportation, depending on the area. And then the cost is approximately $3,000 per year per camera going forward. So I think you have 6 cameras in that quote. Is that correct? However, that we just did that as kind of a starting point for you to look at. That main number can just be divided by 6, and we'll entertain any types of additions. Those positions will be chosen by the captains of patrol and investigations to see where exactly we think that the holes in kind of the network we're setting up are in Park. Obviously, Lakeshore, Ottawa Beach Road are prime examples of places where people might come into the township or out of the township or traverse on their way out to the state park. They may already be on the map in Holland Township. I don't have access to that map right now, but those will all be considered. If we have one, say, on Douglas, on the other side of 144th, maybe it doesn't make sense to put it here. So,
Yeah.
When you guys have a decision on what type of numbers you're looking at, we'll sit down and we'll put them in the places that that make the most sense for our investigative purposes, and then we'll go from there. Yes,
How
sir.
quick is the database access and that report comes back to you that you had?
Within, there's a lag time. Did you get the training on that? How long is that lag time? 30 seconds? Yeah. Ultimately, yeah, within seconds of a hit. So if we have it, if it's a stolen vehicle or involved in a homicide, we're notified within under a minute, so that our deputies know, oh, it was westbound on Otto Beach Road. Let's get out in the area.
Is that Eric, is that a stationary camera or?
Yes.
Okay.
So part of that first year cost is the permit to put it on the road, the driving of a post if there isn't one available, and then the other part is just the $3,000 for cameras. So generally, there are mobile ones that we could purchase if we wanted to, but then there's some added issues and I think some added costs. So.
Under Sheriff, would you just clarify that this is for criminal activity and not for speeding or traffic violation?
Sure. Yes. Thank you for that. Yeah. This isn't the camera that writes you a ticket that you get when you're going through the suburbs of Chicago. This isn't. This isn't take a picture of the face of the driver. It's just purely the rear of the vehicle. I mean, I'm sure at times they might catch a front plate if it sees a plate. I don't know exactly what triggers, if it's motion plus something, but ultimately, yeah, it's not. Thank you. It's not for traffic enforcement. It's purely for our higher level crimes and our investigative type issues.
Does it look at every single car that goes by?
Yeah. So what I'll do is it can do. There's a certain speed and a certain amount of lanes that it can do. And so anything in Park Township, it would be able to do. But if you start going on to like the highway, you have to start looking at a little more expensive equipment or multiple. So like when we were putting some ones up on the north side on 31, we were trying to make sure it was an area that was 2 lanes and not 3, stuff like that. But yeah, there is a refresh rate of how many can handle at once, but it's nothing that we'd have to worry about.
So the annual cost, ongoing costs, would that also come out of the capital improvement every year, or would that be moved to public safety?
Public safety.
What we would do is kind of just like, so that exhibit that we said was the second half of that contract, we would add flock safety so that you guys, it makes more sense for flock to have one contract with us and then all the municipalities to come on with like an agreement memorandum understanding. And then we'd add it to your exhibit so that if you guys wanted to add one in a year or two or wanted to get rid of one in a year or two, we can make that arrangement through our system and then change the exhibit without having to bring it in front of the county board for a new contract.
The county's not offering to chip in on any of this?
Yeah, we're putting out our 15 cameras to start the system. So yes, and we plan on growing our system, but at this point, if you want additional, it is completely up to the townships on what that looks like for you guys.
So for your 15 cameras that you're starting the system on, where are those cameras located?
There's a map, and the investigative captain has it, and we're working with Flock on it because what you say is, I'd like one here, and then an engineer comes out and says, well, the tree cover's right here, and you're not gonna be able to recharge the battery with the solar.
Would we have gotten one of those 15? Is there a location in Park Township on the initial 15?
I don't want to be held accountable. I'm pretty sure there's one on Otto Beach Road. I don't know if it's in Park or Holland, but I can't say that for sure because we were taking that 15 and trying to get most bang for our buck.
Sure.
In the 15, so to go back, the 15 might not be the one on Otto Beach Road, the ones that Holland Township is adding, because we have a map of, here's if you had 6, or I think they were looking at 16, 12, or 8. I think we had options for them, and we had maps of these are the ones we really need, these are the ones we'd like, and these are the ones that would be perfect.
I would think if you were going to do one in Holland Charter Township, of those 15, you're looking at OBR and River.
Yeah, I mean, well, it gets, so you get kind of, when you have screwy traffic patterns, all of a sudden it gets a little crazy. And also Holland has one on River northbound already. So that coming into the county's worked out for us. They have one on 120th coming into the county, so that's worked out for us.
I was informed by the current sheriff, Kemker, when we initially talked about this, that he had indicated he'd get a hit and they'd have somebody in custody on a significant felony arrest within minutes.
Yeah,
So-
we've had a number of, if that's something you'd like, I can get our, and we don't even have the cameras in our county yet. And we've had a couple of different cases that we've gotten resolutions on instantaneously, some missing persons that have been found, that sort of thing already. And because Wyoming has it, it's part of a statewide, actually national network. So we're getting hits on things coming in from Wyoming. Also, Flock has a corporate side that does not give out the criminal justice information, but just his license plate reader kind of things for corporate, and Lowe's has entered into contract with them. So we have access to that part of that as well. And also we can look at crime-free multi-housing to see if they want to start adding some Flock cameras to some of the bigger apartment complexes that might have a need for that in the Allendale and possibly Holland Township or even Park Township area if the apartment complexes are so inclined.
It seems like fascinating technology. Sure is. What would be wrong with starting off with 2 instead of 6 from the perspective of it's an ongoing expense?
There's nothing wrong with it. I think the decision for the board is, one, is this something you want to try? And then 2, how many do you want to try initially? I don't believe there's anything wrong with it. I think if you were to have, you're going to have a camera somewhere on OBR, right? If we put a camera in Park Township, it's going to be in Ottawa Beach Road. Where the second one would go, maybe Lakeshore, I don't know, but yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with starting with 2.
And to go with that, so there was a part of me that thinks that, hey, if they're out putting out, maybe there'll be some savings on doing all at once, but that's not the case. The price is going to be the same if you choose 2 now and 2 later, other than maybe contract changes. But ultimately, you're completely correct. There's nothing that says that. And to your point, if Ottawa Beach is already covered by Holland Township on the Douglas side, maybe we just do Lakeshore and Lakewood, or we go on the north side to Butternut up going into Port Sheldon. So there's lots of things that'll be taken into consideration when we know which cameras we already have out. But that's, like I said, that's an operational decision I'm going to leave to the captains of patrol and investigations for their long-term plan.
Thinking about south side. The other side of the Mac.
There's not a lot of streets there that have tremendous volume.
I do not have a complete map of Holland's. I mean, I'd have access to it if I got on the system, but honestly, I played with it for a hot minute when I was a sergeant, and I have not looked at it since. But I don't know where theirs are.
They already have a system.
Flock, yes, Holland has a system in there building on it as well. So Holland has a system, yes.
So it's finally possible that.
West 32nd or South Shore possibly, but I couldn't say for sure. And again, we have those captains that I speak of have those locations, so that's taken into consideration as well, right?
Right. Any other questions?
Does it, or is it even possible that it would work with your portable ones that you had at the fairgrounds last weekend?
So not portable, but one of the things that we are looking at, depending on which vendors that we are looking at for our car cameras, certain car camera vendors have Flock software that goes into or works with the camera systems that turns every one of our in-car cameras into a Flock plate reader. So we would be effectively adding 170 cameras that may be out at any particular point in time. That's one of the vendors that we're looking at. We haven't awarded a contract on that yet.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll look for a motion.
Make a motion in start 2 and reevaluate in 6 months.
Support. Any other questions, comments?
What is the time frame for installation?
So they'll have to start, now that I have, or once I have authorization on what they are, the captains will decide where they go. We'll contact Flock. Flock will have to start the permitting process. That depends a lot on where we decide to put them. And then our thought process with the ones that we're having put in now is sometime this fall.
Can we amend the motion to include 6 months from when they were placed?
Yes.
And I'll support the change.
And I will make sure to report when the Park Township ones come in and when they're activated so that you have that for your records.
Good, thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I just want to say thank you very much for your continued support of the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and if anybody is unhappy with myself, you can all blame Eric because he was actually technically the very first person to interview me for Park Township.
I have one last question. I apologize. And thanks, Sergeant. For reminding me. So going back to our last action item, as I told you, I began discussions with Zealand Township about the sharing of the unit responsibility and their attendance into that unit to take over a partial share. They had not decided one way or the other. Am I free to continue those conversations and bring back to the board any type, if they agree to get on board, what that cost reduction will be to you, or would you like me to tell them that you are set to take the?
You can continue discussion with.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure I had your permission.
Yes, thank you. All right, policy chapters 3 and 4, they weren't in the packet. Do we have more than one copy?
Yeah, everybody has a copy at the dais.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking for mine.
There, you can have that one.
Yours? Oh, I thought that was yours.
If you want those in there, I would add that into the motion.
So there was 2 changes. We'll look for a motion to approve those changes.
So are you open to more changes?
Oh, sure.
Just came back from the MTA conference at Grand Traverse. The only convenient place to eat in the joint was a buffet restaurant for both breakfast and lunch. I don't know about dinner. I didn't eat dinner there, but both breakfast and lunch were $19.95. And if you had a reasonable tip, it was a $23 deal. So that by the time you got through with your breakfast and lunch at this resort location, you had spent $46 of your $55 daily, which leaves you with what, $9 for dinner. I think perhaps in view of inflation and everything else that's going on in the world, you might want to revisit that $55.
I would agree wholeheartedly.
Sorry, Connie.
We just done before we turn in our expense accounts.
You note that I put no dinners down.
Right, then why don't we table this till the next meeting? And we'll come up unless we want to have a discussion about figures now.
I like that idea because I've got changes I talked about last month that I would get to Howard and I failed to do that. So it was some statutory thing. So
Right.
Allow me to.
Good deal.
Can we have a motion to table this?
I move that we postpone the discussion of policy manuals 3 and 4 until the next board meeting, regularly scheduled board meeting.
All right, thank you. And any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right.
And if it's a sidebar, can Howard recommend a number for that?
Yes.
Right.
All right. Now we're gonna move now, Gather Park Township, and Brian, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. We've been, I would say there's a very robust process going on in getting around and getting in front of the public, all different age demographics and so on, and groups to gather that information to decide, okay, what should be in the community center. In doing that and doing that right, we have exceeded our initial $25,000 and are asking for another $10,000 to complete this project. I think where we're at right now is, I think it's probably gonna take another $4,500 to really do it, but we're asking for 10, just if there's some little unforeseens. We have another big meeting coming up on May 21st at West Ottawa High School. To really go over where we're at. That will be the last meeting, and then from that, we'll be compiling that information for the rest of the group to be seen. But we're asking for an additional $10,000 to continue to fund those efforts.
Would you like to make that motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we get, we're asking for another $10,000 to continue the efforts of the Gather Park Township efforts.
So support, right? Any comments, questions? Right. Thank you for all the work in there.
Yeah.
And pass it along to the committee as well. I know they're doing a lot of good work there.
Yeah, Lynn and the team are knocking it out of the park.
Good.
That's great. Just a question on the OMA Communities Act. I am unable to go to that meeting next week or 2 weeks. I would strongly encourage us as board members to attend and learn about the process.
Yep.
I just don't want to get in trouble with Open Meetings Act if 4 of the board show up at a informational meeting. And this is I can't speak more highly of what's going on with that team. And your presence at that meeting speaks volumes to them. I've gone to a couple of meetings, I've had a delightful time learning and interacting with the team. I strongly encourage you to go. But as a term my colleague here, what do we have to watch out for such that if we go to this type of gathering that we walk in? I'm not trying to put this on your calendar, but I'm encouraging you to put it on your calendar.
Board members that are going, once you get a quorum that's there, and there's the discussion and deliberation between or among you, it would need to be noticed as a board meeting. So if you're going and you're kind of sitting and just observing and listening and not participating in any of the discussion or deliberation, you're less likely to be found in violation of the Open Meetings Act. The safest, absolute safest course of action is to kind of interact with each other to make sure that you don't have a quorum present. That's the safest course of action. If you do go and you've got one person who's kind of leading or facilitating the meeting, just make sure the rest of you stay silent. Just listen, don't discuss it yourselves, don't deliberate. It might be tough, especially for some of you, when you've got people in the community coming up to you and saying, hey, what do you think about this? And say, I don't want to violate the Open Meetings Act. You know, we'll say that before discussion. I'm just here to obtain information.
So, okay, all right, good. Thank you for the clarification and the warning. But again, I go back. You will learn a lot about this, and this team has done exceptional work in the first few months they've been working. So
a follow-on question on that. As individuals, there's nothing wrong as an individual to go to this event and to observe what's going on and be aware of that. It's just that when, as individuals, we come together and start having a conversation, then that violates.
When you have a quorum present, and that quorum is involved in discussion or deliberation on issues of public policy that are going to come before you, that becomes problematic. So Skip was talking about going to the MTA. I don't know how many of you went, but theoretically, if 4 of you go to the MTA, that, right, but I'm just saying, if 4, that's why I said hypothetically. So if 4 of you go to the MTA meeting, you can go there to learn. But what you shouldn't do, for example, if there is discussion about farmland preservation, have the 4 of you come together and say, this is what we need to do for Park Township. We need to restrict where we put our utilities. That's when you violate the Open Meetings Act. So yes, individually you can go to places, even if there's a quorum for purposes of learning or obtaining information, but you shouldn't discuss or deliberate issues among the quorum. The problem is if you have 4 people there physically present, again, one of you can facilitate it. The other 3 of you really shouldn't discuss anything, because once you do, it's kind of like, correct, you've got it. It's various shades of gray, which is why I said, again, the most prudent, conservative way would be to make sure you don't have a quorum present. And so you can kind of arrange it well, hey, are you going? Okay, if you're going, then I'm not. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
That's the safest course of action.
Got it.
Okay.
I'll be there.
The time and date is when?
It is 5:30 on the 21st at West Ottawa High School.
What day is
I would like to be there. I plan to go.
School?
Which high
Oh,
school?
I have it as the high school. I have to get clarification on that myself. I believe it's in the cafeteria on the north campus. And I can make sure that that gets out to everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Anyway, there is no discussion item, so we'll move on to the manager's report.
Okay. As we talked about earlier, we have been moving on farmland preservation. One of the things that are the specific details is identifying how and where or I should say the size of sewer lines along James Street, and going through a number of conversations with Mr. Aaron Nybor in Holland Charter Township, who manages the consolidated system. And so initially we were going to potentially restrict a sewer line to go into a particular development. County Health has indicated that they're not comfortable with the water table for septic in that development. So we'll go back to sewer, but we'll look at an 8-inch as opposed to a 12-inch, which means that the township will need to enter into an agreement, most likely with the consolidated system on that 8-inch pipe, and I'll give you more updates and more details on that contractual arrangement as it comes. But that really is when Mika was talking about how we're working on the details. That's really what we're talking about, right? We set a policy of the sewer boundaries, and now we're implementing those policies to do farmland preservation effectively. We are, I don't know if anybody has kind of gone through Cooper Van Wieren Park recently. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to take a walk. It is absolutely gorgeous in there. The bike path folks have already cut in 2 trails. They are now working on a 3rd trail. Me and the gentleman from that group and one of the neighbors walked the property on the edge. The bike path trail that they're now going to start working on, they can't guarantee when it's going to be done. Most likely this summer is going to have really steep hill inclines and come down. It's going to be beautiful because there's true elevation changes on that property right on the borderline of one of the of our property and one of the residents, and the resident there has been gracious to allow us to go close to the property line. Everywhere else we have stayed away from the property line because we want to respect that resident's privacy, but because that elevation of that hill that is there, it's just going to be fantastic. We were walking through it today and talking through it, talking about the details, and I'm really excited for that. So based on what the board did tonight with some biking infrastructure, some signage upgrades out there, that's going to be just a phenomenal park addition. Really happy about that. One of the things that the staff is starting to work on is a bathroom facility out here for the park. We're working, we had our first meeting today. We're working with the architect. We'll be meeting again next week shortly. And we're working with the architect to look at a design and then hopefully try and either get some builders to help us with that project, either with in-kind donations or financial contributions. And we'll keep pressing along on that. Obviously, that brings up tremendous engineering conversations about where water lines are going, where sewer lines are going. There's a lot of details that we're trying to work out with respect to that. So there was some dialogue on that today with for the bathrooms that will be out there, whether or not we have the depth to do gravity, or if we're going to need to put in force mains. So just a lot of detailed conversation with respect to building out that park.
There's a question there. Would you ever consider just putting a septic building?
No, because there's already a line. There's a private line that goes right alongside this building on that side. And so because of that line, you're much better off going with a sewer line. And so the question becomes, we may request that the board take a look at relocating and moving the bathroom facility closer to this building so that because of the length of that line, if we can shorten up where the bathroom is, maybe we can get it so that we can keep gravity as opposed to having to do a force main system and then a pump the rest of the way, which we're hoping we can do. So we have charged Pride and Newhoff and our engineers with analyzing and evaluating if we move that bathroom facility closer to 152nd, I'm sorry, not closer to the building, but closer to 152nd, could we get to a place where we could still do gravity? So the short answer to the question is no, but the longer answer is we're always much better off doing force main over septic if we have an existing line, and we'd much rather do gravity.
Just quick, just a slight pushback, and I just talked to Derek Bartlett, and he was saying that the Tulip City Pickleball Open, the first year out of blocks, they had 240 players. And they're expecting that next year that would be doubled. I'd hesitate putting the bathroom in a convenient spot for sewer and an inconvenient spot for 500 folks who have to go to the bathroom or going to the pickleball court.
Yep.
So don't sacrifice the location for the sewer, put the bathroom in the right place for the people who actually will sit in it.
Yeah. I get it. We're working on the berms where you guys approved the berm concepts at the last meeting, and we've already got quoted from one of our excavators that we normally work with, and we're waiting for quotes from the other excavator that is already doing the work out there. So we're moving forward on that project. Congratulations. The capital campaign is off and running, and we received our first donation. The township received a $10,000 donation for the capital campaign. I won't indicate the who, but I'll talk with the individual if that person wants to be notified or identified. But congratulations on the capital campaign team. I know Steve and I and Jim have been working quite hard on that. Daryl Bartlett is also been working hard and going to be involved, and that's really going to kick off in the next few more months, and we're going to really hit it hard with trying to identify funds. But yeah, congratulations that the first check came in. So great job, team.
And when we can celebrate the why, the individual supported the completion of the wildlife installation,
Prairie
restoration. So there were many things that excite people. In case the person wanted to finish the job for the wildflowers.
Yeah. Evaluations are ongoing with all of the staff in the offices, a little behind on that. So my apologies to the staff for being a bit behind, but evaluations are ongoing. And so those raises and increases will be prorated back to April 1. With that, I want to say, and I probably need to do a better job of this more often, but just acknowledge how phenomenal our staff is and phenomenal our department heads are. Oftentimes you see Mika in the audience and Connie in the audience and the chief. Ryan is here today. I cannot do this work. It's not about me. I'm just rowing the ship in a particular direction. These are the folks that do all of the work, Danielle and her team. We really, truly do have a great staff. And I want to thank you all. So I appreciate your hard work and your effort. Anybody that works for me knows that when you work for me, we don't go slow, and there's a lot to do. But I appreciate you guys all keeping up. I truly thank you for that. Also want to acknowledge our new hire, Sarah, in the building department. She's been phenomenal. New hire. She has hit the ground running. She is getting trained up. Staff is already talking about increasing some of the responsibility, incrementally, slowly, but really great hire there. Really happy for that addition. So just wanted you all to know that. Newsletter is going out here shortly. It's going to be a bigger newsletter than normal. We're going from a 2-page spread to a 4-page spread. have a huge spread on what's going on the park and what's going on in terms of public safety. So I know our communications team has been working on that. One of the things that we're going to focus on in the next 6 months is upping 6 months to a year is upping our communication game. We've had the newsletter redesigned. We've had our online newsletter redesigned. You know, I think that this is an area where I haven't focused all that much and legitimately could be critiqued on that. And I think we need to up our communications game. So we're going to be working a lot with our consultant, communication consultant, PR consultant, and really trying to improve that element of the township. Quincy Street Road End is working. I've got a meeting on that, I think maybe tomorrow. If not early next week. The permit is in through Eagle. It's very likely and possible that we actually don't need any permit through Eagle. It's a complicated process. Turns out that, and this will be a discussion with the board potentially at the next meeting, but the sand on that, you know, that dune, we may very well likely the Fed regulations or the Eagle, not Fed, Eagle regulations in this case may kind of make it so that putting that sand there is more hassle than putting in physical infrastructure. So other than the sand issue, which we're still evaluating, we don't believe that the steps or the erosion control measures, whatever we're calling it, to begin the Quincy Street access will need a permit. The posts that Ryan and his team is going to be working on that in the next few weeks. I talked to Ryan a day or two ago on that. So that'll be going in very shortly. That won't need a permit. Cutting down the tree probably will not need a permit. The only question we have now is that sand. We're still working through that because Eagle's requiring quite a bit for just putting in more sand. So it's a bit odd, but we'll work through it. And if it needs to, it'll come in front of the board for approval. South side, I believe the contractor is going to be starting in a few weeks. I was told not to hold to the date, but very shortly we'll be getting in that not retaining wall, excuse me, the riprap in front of the retaining seawall at the South Side Kayak Park. So that's great. And then let's see, I think that security camera upgrades. I was thinking that I wasn't sure what that meant, if it was the cameras that we voted on. No. We will be installing some keypads on this door to the boardroom and the doors behind us. And the reason for that is when those pickleball courts start being utilized, and my guess, and don't quote me on this date, is my guess is around June 1, we'll be playing pickleball. But when that happens, we're going to need bathroom facilities relatively quickly. We won't have the historic hangar operational by then, and that's still a bit of a long walk away. We need to have these public restroom facilities open, which we will. I've already indicated to all of you that that's going to happen in order to create better security, particularly for our staff. And at times when the planning commission is here late, I know that there are staff members that are here late. We need to make sure that they're able to be in this building safely without thinking that there's people coming and going from this room to the hallway. So what we are going to do is we are going to have the ability now to lock these doors and lock the door behind in the conference room. So everything can be, so that back door can be open to the public, but the public cannot get in anywhere else in the building. So that will be an upgraded security system that is forthcoming. With that, I will take any questions if you have them.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. Please.
Hi again, Dave Klein-Jans, 1898 Royal Court. I have a few comments. One, I'm glad to hear you're working on the Quincy Street lake access, because there was some talk a while ago about selling that. So I had heard it in the meeting. Okay. So maybe it didn't go anywhere, but and I commented on it at the time. The south side thing, I don't know, I understand the whole thing of the Jennison Road end, but lake access is clearly important. It's in the master plan. It's one of the big things people want. And I would recommend that we never give up the land under any circumstances. And the second thing is we talked about, or you guys talked about, getting dollars to look at what the dollars are in the improvements and the value of the land. One thing that I don't know how you quantify is the dollar value of the enjoyment that residents get from that lake access. So how you put that in the equation seems difficult to me, but I would not give up the land. Bike paths. Well, with a lot of discussion of bike paths, one thing I would recommend is the north path that goes across the airport is kind of a gravelly path. And I know I heard one guy falling broke his hip. I know my wife refuses to ride on it because she feels unsafe. And I would recommend you put some money in the budget to resurface that. Maybe I haven't ridden a lot on that more white type of surface. It seems to hold together better.
It absolutely does.
Yep. So if we could do that to that north path, that would be a good thing. And coming on the repair stand, I know a lot of people have them. I ride my bike quite a bit. It never breaks near a repair stand. I don't know if they're very useful. I carry tools with me, and if my bike's broken, I'll get my wife to pick me up, take me home, where I have tools and I can fix the bike. I wouldn't have her bring me here. So I think you could save a few dollars on that one. That's all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Anyone on this side?
Shar Clark, oh, your turn. Shar Clark, 97 Algonquin. Just one comment. I thank you for approving the flock cameras. Safety is something I hold near and dear to my heart. And coming from the Detroit area, while these cameras specifically will not be targeted for speeders and such, they are a very integral part of public safety. And the experiment with starting with 2 is totally feasible, and we'll see how well they do, and hopefully we'll add more in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. Anyone else?
Doug Flambeau, 100 North Division. I'm back. If y'all missed me, I've been busy in West Olive with OI the past year, so this meeting came last of all. Anyway, Mr. Slickers mentioned, kind of struck me kind of odd. He said that 7 feet was no good to the township. 7 feet is wider than a bike path, and 7 feet is a nice little path to the water for any resident that wants to go down and get to the water's edge. 7 feet is plenty of space. So to make a comment like that, it just kind of struck me kind of odd, trying to portray to the board that it's only 7 feet. You can't do anything with it anyway. No, but a lot of people can walk down to the water with 7 feet. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll close public comment. All right, now we'll move to board comments. Trustee Cerny.
I don't know how many fairgrounds, fair board last weekend. Obviously, you guys seen the busyness out there, so they're underway, and it was a heck of a turnout. I don't know if you read the minutes from the airport meeting, but they're preparing for this year's fair, obviously, and it's their 65th anniversary, 65th fair. And they're giving away a 65-inch screen TV every day to the fair. And they're also giving away $55 or $65 in fair dollars several times each day. So they're really hitting the 65. As far as the ZBA, Mika's report, they did it with the one which got passed, and we're all good there.
Great, thank you. Right.
You received my Max Minute report. We did meet, Howard County and I met with Max this week to review the contract for the last year and the coming year. Anyway, Max has just been extremely busy. A lot of, what do you call, private contracts have been requested from them. Which is kind of, they have to jump through some loopholes, but they have 5 buses they're going to retire and they're replacing, so they're not getting rid of those buses because of some of the requests that have come in around town. They, once again, are at full staff. They're still looking for some part-time drivers. What else was I gonna, and they, started their Saturday runs again. We've been approached by a couple people, Howard and I, of people who would like us to look at adding the night owl run. Right now we run till 7 o'clock at night in Park Township.
6:30.
6:30.
Or 7.
But yeah, anyway, we've had several people request the night owl service because they can't get home from work. They work a different shift and they have a hard time getting home. So we may have a couple people coming to our board meeting and requesting that. We don't have a millage, so it's expensive to run that kind of night owl thing for a few people. So we are going to get some numbers from Max on exactly what it could cost us. So that's just an update. They've been very busy, very active, and that's it.
Thank you.
You got, excuse me, you got Mika's report. It's always very helpful and lots of information in it. I won't take it any time with the details of in that other than the development side of that. You saw that the sidewalk on Wisteria, or actually side path on Wisteria Avenue, is starting to get moving along. That's all part of the reserve at Lake Mac PDU, and it's good to finally see them putting some time to build the park, so to speak. The other thing you saw also was that the pre-construction is going on in both the Blue Dover as well as the Shorewood development. So all those approvals that we've done are moving forward with new development in the township, which is pretty cool. I was part of the three of us that went to the MTA conference up in Traverse City along with our manager as well as Dave Copenhagen was there, so we had a good turnout there. The MTA conference is always very, very positive and it's very good to go to and learn some things. And the final thing I have is you may be aware that the legislation is working. The House legislation HB 5438 is short-term rental ordinance, or would that be a law being put forward. The MTA is actually sponsoring it, and they're sponsoring it because it is very pro local control. Joan Zurup has been deeply involved with it, following very closely, as well as writing memos to the committee with some suggestions as well as her approval of it. There is a little bit of terminology in there that makes kind of some iffy about whether or not you can actually control by zoning, or you can't control by zoning, so to speak, which means you couldn't have commercial and exclude residential. So working on that part of it a little bit to make sure that we can make sure that the zoning part of it is accurate, and then secondly, that we can also as a unit or as a municipality tell them that we don't want any, which is what our current position is. So still working on that one with the committee.
Good, thank you.
I have that draft of the ordinance if you want, or the law, as well as a summary if you want a copy of it. I can get that to you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Clerk Keeter.
Nothing to report on the airport. We meet next Monday. Another one of those calendar works. So you're up to date with them. There was an election this week. As usual, it was a fairly slow election. It was the millage, non-homesteaded millage renewal for West Ottawa. One kicker was our precinct 4 is part of County Commission District 2. So we had a fairly active turnout in precinct 4. Interesting to note that 73% of our ballots cast this time around were absentee ballots. I think it's the way of the future. I've been saying that since 2018, and I still believe it. It was an amazingly smooth election, thanks to Danielle and her team, which includes our new full-time employee, Krista Greendike, who is currently running our console tonight. Krista has been working elections for Park Township as long as I have. So with all of the sometimes full-time and part-time work that she's done over the years, we brought her in not as a new hire, but as a promotion, and credited her with a few years of service. She's an amazing addition to the team. She made a difference in this election, as she always has. And we're delighted to have her on board. I also, during our preliminary meetings with the chairs, announced that I am retiring, that I'm not on the ballot for November, and I'm retiring for the 3rd time. So.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Would it be possible to ask our attorney to take a look at what's being proposed around short-term rental and maybe provide a position to us on kind of the ins and outs of that versus, I mean, I could read it, but I won't be able to make heads or tails out of it more than likely.
I'm happy to do that if the board would like me to.
Sure.
I sure would really appreciate it. Saying around that. You've already heard what I had to say around the Gather Park Township. Just a lot of great efforts by a lot of people, information together around that. Excited to present to the board when we get that wrapped up to the point where we can.
Fantastic. Great. Also went to the NTA conference. We can be very proud that we are represented in Lansing by such a qualifying group. I tell you, what goes on in Lansing is a different animal than what we do here. And I'm so glad that we're represented in all townships, all sizes. And it is, we forget. And you just have to go to these conferences and you just have to talk with a few people here and there. You start to realize how fortunate we are to have a team. There's often many townships that have very few residents, period, and even fewer who want to serve. And so what a delight to be able to have folks who want to serve and a team behind us and supporting us. And so it's a humbling experience to go and be part of these events. And so thank you for the township to allow us to be able to learn in that environment. So I encourage folks who haven't gone to go because it's a high quality event.
Good, thank you. Right, I went to the MAC, you see the notes from there, and everything passed. So all the road repairs are being repaired. So who can be at the work session on May 30? So 1 so far. All right, do we have anything to work on?
Yeah, yes. I don't have anything off the top of my head at this moment, but I think at least for this, in this moment, I would say I want to put it on the calendar and then you and I chat.
Okay.
And then we decide, but
Okay.
if you're asking me, do we put it on the calendar? Yes, and I'd rather have more meetings than less.
Okay.
I know that
All right.
you guys would rather have less, but
No,
like,
I want to have a useful meeting.
yeah, I understand
Okay,
that. Yeah.
so, okay, so let's plan on it. We'll see if there's something in particular that will be on the agenda. So plan on it, put it on the calendar, and then obviously we have the June 13 regular meeting as well.
But just a suggestion, Howard, if part of the meeting could be a walking tour of the hangar, the pickleball courts, maybe we can talk about the Cooper Memorial. This site itself, we should be so intimately involved with what's going on with it. So when we're asked by the public, hey, what's the status? versus the one, I think it'd be helpful if we spent 30 minutes, 40 minutes of that 30 meeting just to do a walkthrough on this site. This site is critical as we were following strategic planning. This is the year of the park. And every time I walk out there, something's changing. It's moving.
Yep. 30 seconds.
When I was in my manager's report, I commented how great our department head staff is. And I also want to tell you how phenomenal Dan is. And I think, you know, Dan is so integral to what we do and so helpful in all of the projects. So thank you.
Right. Good. Would you like to make any comments?
No.
Okay, all right. Don't want to exclude you. You're part of the team. So, all right. All right, we will look for a motion to adjourn.
Support.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you all. Good meeting. Accomplished a lot.
I was gonna complain about the length of the change, but we got through it.